Okay, so good afternoon and welcome to bill hearings for the House Health and Government Operations Committee. I'm your chairman, Jocelyn Peña-Milnick, joined by my vice chair to the left, Ms. Bonnie Collison. I want to first start by thanking the committee. We just got off the floor and we were there for almost 7 straight hours without a break. And we literally came here. A lot of us have not eaten, but we're committed because you guys waited a very long time and we didn't want to make you wait any longer. So I'm going to go very quickly through the rules. Please turn your phone to vibrate. I've done it myself. All bills that are Senate cross files or previously heard House bills will be sponsor only. All I need you to say is that it's in the same posture as the House bill. For those of you that are listening at home, you may seem like we're rushing it. We know these bills. We have heard it, and we do everything here by subcommittee. We have studied it. We welcome everyone who's for it or against it. We ask thoughtful questions. It's just that we have seen most of these bills already. I want to thank the senators for their patience and the advocates and witnesses that are here today waiting. For the Senate bills that do not have a House cross-file, we will hear from the bill sponsor and then one witness in favor and one witness opposed. You have 2 minutes for the witnesses. The public has already submitted testimony. For the committee, if you've seen the bill, please adhere to the best question possible. Members of the public are able to view the live stream of this hearing on the Maryland General Assembly website and YouTube. And today we will hear the bills. We're going to start with Senator Kramer, which is Senate Bill 749. And it's going to be the State Board of Dental Examiner applicants licensed or certified in another state. And it is actually the cross-file of House Bill 723 as well. Senator Kramer, you can get started, and thank you again, all of you, for being patient.
And thank you for your long day, Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee. Ben Kramer, introducing Senate Bill 749, which is the cross-file to the good delegate Kerr's House Bill 723. To the best of my knowledge, they're in the exact same posture, so I thank you all so very much. And that's all I got, Madam Chair.
All right, thank you. Are there any questions on a bill that is the exact cross-file of the House bill? Seeing none, thank you so much. We appreciate you.
Thank you all.
And this concludes the bill hearing on Senate Bill 749. Next, we're going to go to the fabulous Senator Kagan. This is Senate Bill 775, work group to study implementation of an expanded 311 non-emergency system. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, friends and colleagues on Health and Government Operations. Sadly, this is not in the same posture, but it's a great bill, and it's another Delegate Kerr cross-file. This is taking the next step towards creating a 311 system to lighten the load on our 911 systems, which are overloaded with non-emergency calls. We like what the House did mostly, but I trust that the bill will be in good shape with Delegate Kerr and with all of you. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much. Are there any questions for the good senator? Seeing none, thank you, Senator, for being with us and for your patience. This actually concludes the bill hearing on Senate Bill 775. Next, we're going to go to Senate Bill 354, Maryland Inventory of Cemeteries and Burial Sites Work Group Establishment. Good afternoon, Senator Stalin. How are you?
I'm well. Thank you, Madam Chair, Vice Chair, and committee. For the record, Senator Johnny Ray Salling and Senate Bill 354, which is cross-filed. But at the same time, there's just two changes with the amendments. One amendment is as a sponsor. The second is it eliminates one part of the OCO, and it just gives it to the Historic Society. Other than that, Madam Chair, that's the bill.
Thank you so much. Are there any questions for the good senator? Seeing none, Senator, thank you for being with us.
Thank you very much.
We appreciate
God bless.
you.
Have a wonderful day.
Thank you. This concludes the bill hearing on Senate Bill 354. Any other senators here? Anyone here for any senators? Can you please come up and give us your name and what is the bill you're testifying on? And let us know if the bill is in the same posture.
Good afternoon, Chairwoman and members of the Health and Government Operations Committee. For the record, I'm Anthony Joseph, here to testify on behalf of Senator Antonio Hayes. Senator Hayes strongly supports SB 829, which extends the timeline for completing the 2021 statewide disparity survey and preserves the Minority Business Enterprise Program while that work is finalized. We would like the committee to consider amending SB 829 to add the language referenced in State Government Article 9-1E-07. This would apply the conditions of the MBE program to the goods and services procurements of the sports wagering licensees. This language comes at the request of the Maryland State Lottery and Gaming Control Agency, and it was the language that was the law until 2024 when the original language was repealed. The amendment reinstates the language and would extend applications of the MBE program consistent with the goals of the bill overall. Matthew Mickler is here from MDOT to answer any questions. The cross-file bill, HB 991, passed the House Health and Government Operations Committee unanimously and was approved by the full House. This strong bipartisan support reflects the shared commitment to advancing equity in the state procurement and underscores the urgency of passing SB 829. I urge a favorable report on Senate Bill 829 to ensure the state continues to address disparities in contracting with a strong, legal, and data-driven foundation. Thank you.
Thank you. And I see the letter from the Maryland Department of Transportation on page 2 of their testimony. They describe the amendment that you just referenced to. Are there any questions? Delegate Hill.
You did a wonderful job. Just want to clarify, the House bill has already gotten this new language, so we're just changing that, or you're changing it in both the House bills being changed in the Senate and the Senate bills being changed here?
It would be in both. So, Matt Michael.
Can you give us your name?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you so much. Just for the record.
My apologies, Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, and members of the committee. Matt Michler with the Department of Transportation. It would be in both. We're proposing the same amendment be done on the House bill and the Senate.
And thank you. Thank you for being with us. We put you on the spot, so it is on us. But thank you for your flexibility and for being with us today.
Thank you,
So
Madam.
consider it done. We will put it forward to the committee, okay? And they'll decide. I don't see a problem, though. All right? Any other questions? All right, thank you for being with us. We really appreciate you. You have a blessed day, and you did very well.
Thank you very much.
This concludes the bill hearing on Senate Bill 829. Anyone else here for any other senators? Who is here for a bill? Can you give me your name? The Controller's Office, can you come up? Okay, thank you. So you're here for... Oh, the next page. Oh, forgot there was 2 pages. All right, for Senate Bill 665, Maryland Uniform Disposition of Abandoned Property Act revisions.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair. For the record, Matt Dudzik on behalf of the Office of the Comptroller. Wonderful to be here again. It's been some time. This bill is Senate Bill 665 is the cross-file of House Bill 761, which was heard before this committee. Senate Bill 665 was passed without the amendments that were adopted by this committee. We would like to see those amendments adopted on Senate Bill 665 as well. Other than that, the bills are identical.
Thank you so much. And why weren't the amendments put in the Senate, just out of curiosity?
The amendments were based on some discussions that we'd had with stakeholders, such as the Maryland Insurance Administration, that happened after we'd already submitted to the Senate. The Senate bill was heard first.
Okay.
So the amendments are all clarifying in nature and based on those discussions with stakeholders.
All right, wonderful. Any questions or concerns? Thank you very much. We appreciate you. This concludes the bill hearing on Senate Bill 665. Anyone else for a governmental bill? Sir?
Hi, Howard Barr from the Office of the Attorney General for SB 294.
Will you be so kind and come forward and you can have a seat? 294, that's Senator Feldman?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee. I'm Howard Barr. I'm with the Office of the Attorney General and Principal Counsel to the Department of Information Technology.
So kind and move this closer to you so we can hear you.
Move
And
this
thank you
closer?
for being with us. Yes.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Apologies. The Office of the Attorney General supports Senate Bill 294, which alters the selection of the membership and chair of the Maryland Cybersecurity Council, adds members to the council, and expands the council's responsibilities. Those last two are by way of amendment to the Senate bill. Of particular interest to the Attorney General, the AG will remain a member of the council, but will no longer serve as the council chair and will not have membership selection responsibilities. The OAG supports this change and supports SB 294 as amended by the Senate. As expressed in earlier testimony, it's the position of the OAG that because the AG is not intimately involved in cybersecurity matters, that it's in the council's best interest that it be chaired by and members be selected by an individual with that experience. Thank you for considering this testimony, and for the foregoing reasons, the Office of the Attorney General urges a favorable report on Senate Bill 294 as amended.
And then the amendments are different. I'm looking at a University System of Maryland amendments. Are you familiar with those? They're adding two additional representatives designated by the University of Maryland system with due consideration of geographic diversity. And then it says they suggest the following. That's how it reads now. They suggest two additional representatives designated by the Chancellor of the University System of Maryland.
Yes, I'm familiar with those.
Okay, and you're okay with that?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Thank you. Any other questions? Delegate Johnson.
For amendments on it, on the House bill, and then these Senate amendments, now, are they in the same posture now?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
My pleasure. Thank you for being with us and for being patient. Anyone else from the department that is testifying on a bill? All right. So I saw Senator Salmonair first. Will you be so kind and come? You have 1, 2, 3, 4 bills today. We will start with Senate Bill 57, Funeral Establishment, Crematories, and Reduction Facility, Disposition of Unclaimed Remains, Veterans. And this is actually not cross.
Correct.
Okay.
Thank you for your time, Senator Brian Simonaire. If I can just quickly introduce, my mom came up from South Carolina, so I'm hoping I won't get any tough questions. So.
Very smart.
Yeah, I'm just messing with you, but she is my mom.
Welcome to the committee.
Okay, Senate Bill 57, clarifications on the disposition of unclaimed veterans' remains. I wanted to thank the Department of Veterans and Military Families for their support. Also, you should have gotten a letter from the State Board of Morticians and Funeral Directors. They were a little late bringing their testimony in, Veterans Caucus and so forth. So basically what this does, there's two parts, two articles that deal with cremations. And what happened last year when they did the hydroization remains, they didn't update both sections exactly correct. And one section doesn't have how you handle unclaimed remains of veterans. So what this bill does is it brings those two articles into parity. I worked with the boards. They're in the middle of creating regulations. This will not affect it. They're in support of it. And it just makes sure both sections are identical. That's really what the bill does.
Did anyone testify against the bill in the Senate since it's not cross?
No.
And they're in support of it?
Yes.
And the fiscal impact?
None.
Okay, minimal.
It shouldn't be any. It's just making parity.
Because it says that Department of Veterans and Military Families expenditures, general and federal fund, may increase by an indeterminate but minimal amount.
Right. The program's already in place. What it's doing, it's putting it in both articles because it depends on who owns the crematory, whether it's under the business regulations or the health occupation. So I guess in that sense, if they're actually implementing it correctly, it could be a little fiscal increase. It's only for veterans who are unclaimed and a service organization can't take them. What happens is it comes back to goes into our state cemetery.
All right.
And if they're, that's basically.
Thank you so much for explaining it. Are there any questions for the good senator? He wants Mom to take the questions. Just kidding. There are none, actually. This concludes the bill hearing on Senate Bill 57. Next, we have Senate Bill 275, Senator Salmonair, Modernization of Military Laws Act.
Okay, this one will be easy. I'm Senator Brian Simonair presenting Senate Bill 275. This is identical to House Bill 448, which passed unanimously out of this committee. And what the bill does, I always like it because it rolls off my tongue. It standardized, centralized, and modernized our military laws.
And it's cross.
Yes.
Identical to the House.
Yes.
Wonderful. Are there any questions for this bill that is crossed like the House bill? Seeing no questions, this concludes our bill hearing on Senate Bill 275. Next, we have Senate Bill 277, Health Equality for Service Members Act.
Thank you. Again, Senator Brian Simon presenting Senate Bill 277. This is identical to House Bill 466 in the same form that you passed out of here unanimously. I would ask for your favorable consideration.
Any questions on this bill that is identical to the House? Seeing none, thank you so much, Senator. This concludes the bill hearing on Senate Bill 277. Now we go to Senate Bill 309, Department of Veterans and Military Families Communications Outreach and Advocacy Program alterations. This is not cross.
Correct. Okay. For the record, Senator Brian Simon presenting Senate Bill 309. I want to thank the Department of Veterans and Military Families for their support on this bill. It does two things. First, it updates the department's communications, outreach, and advocacy program to align with the department's mission statement and their new title. As you're aware, last year they changed their title to be the Department of Veteran and Military Families. The department's mission statement says, the Maryland Department of Veterans and Military Family was created with the mission of leading veterans, service members, and their families through life transitions. Current law just has them outreach to veterans. All this does is align it by putting in service members and military families. The second part of this bill provides valuable insight into their outreach program, detailing their communications into the existing report that they send out annually. We all know that communications are important in our campaigns. We could send communications out to the whole state, but we know that's not cost effective or efficient because we only deal in a district. The same thing with the department is working on targeting their message to different groups. And while we agree that in-person contact is the best method, we found out that 99% of the department's outreach is through digital communication. And therefore, as policymakers, it's important we understand their communications efforts, and the additional information will be put in the annual report. Again, I worked with the department on this bill, and they support it. And in summary, the bill aligns the department's outreach with their mission statement and provides additional information in their annual report to the General Assembly. There was no fiscal impact and no opposition, and I ask for your favorable consideration.
Thank you so much. It's interesting because I was looking at the fiscal note for the first reader where they had a fiscal impact, but then there was, council showed me the latest ones, which is wonderful that they can do with existing resources.
Yes.
Are there any questions for the senator? I don't see any. Senator, thank you for your work on behalf of veterans and military families. We really appreciate it. This concludes the Senate bill hearing on Senate Bill 309.
Thank you so much.
And for Mom, thank you for being here, and welcome to the Health and Government Operations Committee anytime. Thank you so much. You're welcome. Have a blessed day. All right, who's here for a senator? Oh, there's a senator. If you can come up, please. I know. He's here for himself. And he used to be in the House. So let's see if he remembers. Just kidding. How are you?
Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, Senator Johnny Mouse, District 37, partner in justice and good with Delegate Tom Hutchinson. It's an honor to be here with you, and you never leave the House. You never leave the House. I feel like I'm home.
First thing you have to do when you come here is say, I know Delegate Hutchinson.
Amen.
I know Shalega, I know Riley, I know Chisholm, I know Morgan, I know Kipke. Anyway, we're going to start with Senate Bill 795. It's great to see you. And this is State Procurement Preferences, Blind Industries and Services of Maryland Packaging and Repackaging. Again, just as a reminder, if your bill is in the exact posture, just tell us that. Thank you.
Yeah, the Senate Bill 795 is in the exact posture as the House bill, and it was approved unanimously in the Senate.
Thank you so much. Any questions on that bill? Seeing none, this concludes the bill hearing on Senate Bill 795. Next, we have Senate Bill 792, State Board of Dental Examiners, Expanded Function Dental Assistance Education and Reinstatement. Go ahead, Senator.
Thank you for the record. Senate Bill 792 is in the exact posture as the House bill. Both bills were amended, and the Senate bill was approved 47-0 unanimously.
Wonderful, thank you, Senator. Any questions for Senate Bill 792? Seeing none, thank you so much for presenting it, and that concludes the bill hearing on Senate Bill 792. And the last bill you have in this committee for today, it's Senate Bill 963, Abandoned and Neglected Cemetery Fund Establishment.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair. Unfortunately, I can't say the same for Senate Bill 963. It was amended, and Senate B&T. Originally, as drafted and introduced, it included a checkoff and created a fund to help restore abandoned and neglected cemeteries. The checkoff portion was removed from the bill. As it stands today, it currently is a fund. That fund is still supported by the advocates. The fund can be funded by nonprofits, donations, whatever sources. It is also authorized, if the governor wants to put money into the fund, that is capped at $250,000. It was approved unanimously.
Thank you. And in this home, the bill was jointly assigned with another committee, so we had to make some changes. But thank you so much. It's the same?
We did the same.
Yeah, we did the same. Thank you. So are there any questions? Seeing none, this concludes the bill hearing on Senate Bill 963. Senator, thank you for being with us, and you're always welcome here.
Thanks for the time. Great to see everybody. I know you had a long day. Stay strong.
Thank
We got
you.
about a week and a half to go.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, who is here for? Senator McKay? Oh, yes, sorry, Senator McKay. I don't know why I didn't see you there, Senator.
Well, I
have to sit right here.
It's just, you're kind of hurting my record of being the eye candy of the General Assembly. Anyhow.
Well, you're here for Senate Bill 639, Garrett County Bids and Contracts Advertisement Exceptions. How are you, Senator?
Oh, I am just loving life, just happy to represent Appalachia, Maryland here on Senate Bill 639. It is in the exact same posture as House Bill 334, which you all passed and then passed on the House. Be glad to answer any kind of questions, but I will really have an awesome and wonderful day if you don't.
Any question for the wonderful patient senator? Seeing none, thank you so much. And look, you have a blessed day.
Blessings
You're
to
welcome
everybody
here
as well.
any day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bonnie.
And next time you come, just tell me you're here and you're going to go first before anyone else. I'm going to make it up to you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other senators here? All right, anyone waiting to testify for Senator? Who was first?
You know, you sure?
Okay, all right.
Thank you,
It's tough
Madam
from
Chair,
where I'm
members of the
sitting to
committee.
see who
Patty
came
Horton
first.
for Senator King with Senate Bill 453.
All right, Senate Bill 453 is state contracts, prohibited provisions. Welcome.
Thank you. Senate Bill 453 is an exact cross-file of Delegate Kerr's House Bill 507. Both bills were unanimously passed by their respective chambers, and so on behalf of Senator King, I respectfully request a favorable report.
Are there any questions? Seeing none, thank you so much for being with us. Give her our love. This concludes the bill hearing on Senate Bill 453. Is there someone here for Senator Muse? Oh, no, you're here for?
Senator Hester.
Okay, let's do it. This is Senate Bill 867, Cyber Maryland Program Revisions. Good afternoon.
Hi, I'm Bridget O'Toole here on behalf of Senator Hester to present Senate Bill 867, Cyber Maryland Program Revisions. This bill transfers the Cyber Maryland Program and Fund from TEDCO to the Maryland Department of Labor. It's cross-filed with HB 1468, sponsored by Delegate Forbes, which your committee heard. And it was presented to your committee with amendments that this bill also has that was passed out of the Senate. The consensus amendments from TEDCO and the Department of Labor remove any mandatory appropriations, so basically changing all the shalls to mays. And so then the fiscal impact of the bill can reflect the appropriation of the program that the General Assembly deems appropriate. Happy to answer any questions, but yeah, I request a favorable report on SB 867.
Wonderful. Is this your first time here?
Yeah.
Oh, wonderful. Are there any questions
Funny.
Okay, real questions. Delegate Hill.
Aye, good to see you. Thank you. Just want to get clarification. There were amendments on the House, but there were amendments on the Senate. Are they in alignment right now, or?
Yeah, they're in
Okay,
alignment.
so-
The bill just hasn't passed out of this committee yet from the House.
Okay, thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you for being here, and this concludes the bill hearing on Senate Bill, was that 867?
Yeah.
867. Is there someone here for Senate Bill 587? Anyone here for Senate Bill 239? Yes. 289? We don't have 289. 239? Yes, why don't we bring that person up, please? And then let's do the 244 as well. Yeah, they're departmental ones. So Senate Bill 239, we have State Finance and Procurement, Local Cybersecurity Preparedness and Response Plan and Assessment repeal. Yes. Ms. Alamy, would you like to unmute yourself and give us a testimony on Senate Bill 239?
Thank you. Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, and members of the committee, my name is Sarah Alamy, and I'm the Legislative Director for the Department of Information Technology. This bill is identical to House Bill 209, which has passed out of this committee unanimously. I ask for your favorable consideration.
Thank you so much. Any questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you for being with us. This concludes the bill hearing on Senate Bill 239, and give the secretary our love.
Thank you.
Oh, do you have the next one? Senate Bill 244, State Government Information Technology Cybersecurity Revisions. Give us that one as well.
Yes, thank you. Again, my name is Sarah Alamy, and I'm the Legislative Director for the Department of Information Technology. This bill, as amended, is identical to House Bill 235, which passed out of this committee unanimously as amended. I ask for your favorable consideration.
Any questions on a bill that is identical? Seeing none, this concludes this bill hearing on
you.
Senate Bill 244. I wrote over it. All right, thank you so much. We do have one, which is Senate Bill 587. Do we know if Senator Muse is on his way? Well, this is the cross file of a bill that we heard and that we voted out of subcommittee, but we have not voted on full committee, and it's going to be in full committee tomorrow, which is a commission on the Maryland Reparations Commission. And it's in the exact, posture, with the exception they added some co-sponsors as the House bill as well, okay? Delegate Morgan.
What problem are we trying to solve with this bill?
I'm going to tell you, do you have my stuff, Jenny? I put it in your office. Okay, can you get it for me? The black binder, the green binder. So if you can give us 1 second, okay?
Sure.
We'll tell you 1 minute. And this is a commission to look at the history, right? It says for the purpose of establishing the Maryland Reparations Commission, right? It's actually staffed by the Maryland State Archives and the Public Historically Black College or University that is in the commission. The commission will study and make recommendations relating to appropriate benefits to be offered to individuals impacted by historical inequality by January 1st, 2027. We'll have the preliminary report, and then the last one, November 1st, 2027. All right, so this commission is going to look at the history of slavery in Maryland. Let me finish. And the commission, if you look at the bill, I'm going to tell you exactly what they're tasked with. On page 3 of the bill, line 20, it says the commission shall study and make recommendations relating to appropriate benefits to be offered to individuals impacted by historical inequality. It goes through the dates, and then it says it will look at reparations payment made and benefits offered in the United States by the federal government, states, cities, religious institutions, and colleges and universities. It will look at the types of benefit appropriate for reparations, including official statements of apology, monetary compensation, property tax rebates, social services for the purchase of residential property, business incentives, child care, debt forgiveness, and higher education tuition waivers and reimbursement. And what it does, basically, you say what purpose will it serve?
Yeah,
is the
what purpose?
fact that in 1790, Maryland had a population of approximately 319,000 people, according to the census that was done in 1790. Out of those, there were 103,000 people that were brought here against their will, that worked in the farms, that worked in different industry. Maryland, the economy benefited from these people that were enslaved, that basically through the years, even after they were free, have been discriminated upon, do not, have a lot of disparities when it comes to health access, when it comes to education, when it comes to where they live. And when you look at the history in this country with the different laws put in place, for example, to keep certain people based because they were black or their ethnicity from certain neighborhoods, the redlining, they couldn't get, loans as well. They were greatly affected. This commission does not have a predisposed outcome. It's simply put in place to study it, to look at the history, to study it and come up with recommendations. It's simply to study it.
With all due respect, Madam Chair,
Yeah.
you just listed off a whole bunch of stuff that happened before I was born.
Right.
The legislation even says it stops at 1965, which is a decade before I was born. So I wonder if it's appropriate to sentence people that are living today for sins that were committed generations before they were even alive. And you talk about the history, I'm looking at this, how this commission is set up. There's two members of the Black Caucus from the House and from the Senate. Maryland Center of History of Cultural, the president of the Center of History of History and Culture, a person from the NAACP, a person from the Legislative Black Caucus, a person from the Legislative Black Chamber, and you go through this list, it also includes an attorney, the comptroller, and the treasurer. So obviously even the word reparations means some type of payout in the future. So I'm just wondering, most of the time we have bills that try to solve a problem. This looks like a bill that's trying to create more problems than it's solving.
No, I think, with all due respect to you, the United States has done this before. They did it with Japanese Americans. They have done it with Native Americans. And if you look at how in the U.S., slavery lasted for over 250 years, and 12.5 million blacks were shipped in chains from West Africa. From their families were separated, they were abused. Yeah. A lot of them lost their life. I know it's not you, but it's our history. And if I may, respectfully, that history follows us, right? And those are the sins of our ancestors, right?
So those are some talking points. The other talking point is that's not being told is by 1980, more Africans immigrated to the United States of their own free will than ever came here on slave ships. We fought the most bloody war in the history of our country to end slavery. 500,000 white Union troops laid down their life. And I tell you, I can't imagine being a injured vet from that war. Or what about a widow or an orphan. I can't see that strife being reflected in this legislation at all. There's no representative from there.
So we're going to agree to disagree because the Army, right? The Air Force, they have provisions for the widows, right? The people that die, and I know the senator is here, so he's going to speak up to it. And I know Delegate Woods afterwards will do it.
Not to pass it? Yeah.
We'll get there. We were having a good, respectful conversation.
Thank you, Chris.
And the questions was asked, why was this bill needed? And I stated because of the history of slavery in this state, right?
Right.
And you're going to go ahead and give your testimony. He'll ask you the question.
Okay.
But welcome to HGO. I'm glad you came through the doors.
Thank you very much, and I apologize. I had a rather lengthy hearing over across the hall. I'm just glad they let me into the House of Delegates building, and they thank you, because they would give me a pass saying I had to leave in 10 minutes now. But good afternoon, Chair.
So you can stay longer than 10 minutes.
For the record, I'm C. Anthony Muse, representing the 26th District, and Senate Bill 587 is the identical cross-file to Delegate McCaskill's bill, HB 1422, which we are hoping you can move both bills. Both bills seek to establish the Maryland Reparations Commission. It is a study. They may study it and find out, as some of you may think, it's not necessary. They may study it and find out here are things that we ought to do. I think it is necessary. They will make recommendations on appropriate benefits for individuals impacted by historical inequality in the state of Maryland. Maryland, like much of the nation, no matter how much it hurts me and hurts us, or however you feel about it, but we do have a deeply complex history regarding racial inequities, from the era of slavery to modern-day disparities in wealth, education, housing, and health care. The lasting impact, and this is where this becomes important. It didn't just happen and then stop, and when it stopped, gee, everybody was all right. There are lasting impacts of these injustices that continue to shape the lives of many Marylanders today. So this commission represents an important step toward first acknowledging and addressing the harm inflicted upon generations of Black Americans. The bill proposes this: a structured, research-driven approach to examining the feasibility and impact of reparations. Specifically, the bill will study these historical injustices in Maryland and how they contributed to systematic disparities, assess and recommend appropriate benefits, whether economic, educational, or community-based, ensure that reparations are meaningful and impactful or not. That's on the committee. Establish eligibility criteria and processes for potential recipients, ensuring transparency and fairness in these recommendations. In addition, the commission will rely on rigorous research, examining reparations efforts nationwide, evaluating past government policies, and considering the role of institutions that have historically benefited from these actions. So while the bill does have a small fiscal impact, the benefits of the work are immeasurable. By addressing historical disparities, we not only invest in justice, but also foster economic growth and stronger communities in a more inclusive Maryland. To give us that privilege to have the study will help us to know, and it could be as simple as an apology to financial. It's whatever the committee comes up with. And so this commission, rather, I should say, I'm sorry, I'm so used to saying committee. The commission comes up with after the study. So for those reasons, I urge a favorable report, and any questions that you have, I'll Answer now.
Delegate Morgan has the first question, and then Delegate Woods.
Do you want me to just leave off from where we were?
Go ahead and ask the question.
Senator, good to see you.
Good to see you, my friend.
Your legislation starts off, we had some debate before you walked in here about historical disadvantaged communities and the sacrifices made. The Civil War ended, it was America's bloodiest war. And certainly white Americans, Caucasians didn't start slavery. We did end it. And they ended it with the death of 500,000
Tell me again,
white
you said that
union members.
they didn't start it, but they ended it. I'm going to make sure I'm hearing you right.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, the word slavery, slave, doesn't it come from, it's a Europe term, I believe.
Well, they were Europeans,
Yeah.
even though they were here, yes.
Civil War ended, the sacrifice was huge. Over 500,000 white troops died to free slaves.
Sure.
That sacrifice is not reflected in your commission at all.
That would be for the commission to study. And let me say this. We too, in that war, lost many blacks. I don't like to call my ancestors slaves. They were not slaves. They were stolen people who were then called slaves. When you look at those who landed here and those who, and by the way, I'm a history major. I'm a history teacher. I've taught history. I've taught American history. I have a PhD in it. So I've taught history and understand it. I would have to disagree with you if you would say about who started it and who benefited from it. That's something you and I can talk over a cup of coffee. And if I'm right, you're paying for the coffee. But here's the point. The Civil War did not stop slavery. There's a book by Michelle Alexander that talks about the new Jim Crow, which says from era to era to era, we may change the monster's clothes, but the monster's still the same. So if you go from that era of the Civil War, you'd have to then go from there into the era of civil rights. You have to go into the marches in the streets. You have to go to the civil rights bills that were signed into law, all for the same reason, to ensure equality for blacks. And so it did not stop with those who died, because there were others who perpetuated it in different ways, and it manifests itself even today in many different ways. I understand what you're saying, and I agree with you. There were those who fought together to end this. We often talk about Martin King and how he marched against civil rights, but no one knows the names of Morty Johnson, who was a white Lutheran priest who, because he marched with Dr. King, was killed the same night. So I'm not saying that they didn't help, but I'm also saying that that there are those who were involved who were not black.
Quick follow-up,
yes,
Madam Chair. In your legislation, it talks about the start of Jim Crow, 1877. And myself as a history buff, I kind of know that era of history. What is your opinion? How did Jim Crow really start?
Jim Crow really started from slavery, as they began to say, we're making things better. Once we were released from slavery, it was replaced with vagabond laws, which said, gee, you're free, but you have to have a job and somewhere to live. You couldn't get a job and somewhere to live because nobody would hire you. They said, and if you don't, you're going back to jail. So it was right back to slavery all over again.
So most historians agree that in 77, what really changed there was the 77 compromise over the presidential election that happened in 76, where Hayes was turned over to be president. And the settlement was Republicans removed federal troops out of the South.
That is
and it
correct.
was Southern Democrats that implemented the Jim Crow era. Would you not agree?
I would say people. I wouldn't say that at all, because
Then who made those changes?
The one thing people had in mind, whether they were Republicans or Democrats.
Well, there was no Republicans elected in the South at that time.
I'm going by what you just said to me. So it didn't matter what the political persuasion was. The hatred for blacks remained, and it crossed all lines. And that's whether you talk about Jim Crow, separate but equal, civil rights, tough on crime. You can just go on and on and on to see how it's had an effect.
So one final question, just to wrap up what we were talking about earlier when you walked in. The word reparation even means payment. You're saying there was fault. Is it fair to sentence people now that really had nothing to do with this?
It will really all depend on your opinion with that. And let me say what I mean. Whether it's consciously or subconsciously, every time I, as a black man, am on a job, but I don't get a promotion, and even though I was better qualified, I don't get the promotion, but one of my white brothers and sisters will get it, they become really perpetuators of that.
But we already have equal opportunity laws on the books. So I'm confused about this commission. It's almost like you're trying to make up for something.
Well, if you look at the statistics, it would show that those laws have meant little to nothing. Numbers talk. We can write it on paper, but when you look at Maryland itself, that blacks, I believe, make up about 30% of the population, but we make up 72% of the jail population. I would say what's written on paper becomes totally irrelevant. I want to know why, and I want to change.
So the county right next to yep.
Let me go to people that have not had one time, two times, three times.
Yeah, I appreciate you just let me ask questions.
But he owes me coffee. We can talk about it.
Yeah, let me just go to other people, and I can come back to you.
I will say that real quick, and I'll finish up with this, that I've heard those talking points as well. The county right next to me in Charles County is also the highest center of black wealth in the entire nation. Just throw that.
Oh, that one. Yeah. Just go ahead.
So much, Senator Muse. Would you not agree that history has shown us that a huge part of the challenges that African Americans have had in this country stemmed from the fact that their enslaved relatives who actually came up with some of the patents, who built the country, that their white slave owners benefited from it, that their white slave owners not only benefited from it, but the generations to generations to generations after them have benefited from that generational wealth that was deprived from those who actually did the work, those who came up with patents that they could not get credit for because you could not get a patent as a slave, and so it was put in the name of the master, and there was no recompense for that. Would you not agree that when the work is done and you're not paid, and someone else generationally continues to benefit from it, that you can't call it the sins of the past when the present still benefits, and the ones who were affected, the present as in the benefits from the work of the ancestors, and those of us whose ancestors were slaves still are at a disadvantage as a result of it?
Exactly. And let me put it this way. For me, this is what it's all about. If you and I are running a race, and you say we're going to race to New York, and then you tell me, but you start in Maryland, and I'm going to start in New Jersey. And then we're just going to continue from there. We'll go to Boston. We'll go to Maine. I'll never catch you. And the reason I'll never catch you is because I started behind. And this is what has happened to the black race. We started behind in everything. Economically, started behind. Educationally, started behind. And all we're asking is a chance to look at how we can catch up. Because what we still see in America now is I mean, you just look at the numbers, it's the same. And so we're saying we want our children to catch up. We want to catch up, and you just said it. I can go on, we built the White House. Slaves built the White House. Many people, they built, and we built a lot of this country, but got absolutely no compensation for it. We're simply saying at some point, we got to at least look at what is the right thing to do, and I think this is a start.
Quick follow-up, Madam Chair, very quick. I promise nothing else. would you not also agree that those people who came here as slaves were considered illiterate? You're not illiterate when you go. If I go to Japan, I'm not illiterate. I just don't know the language in Japan. But they came to this country and were forbidden to learn the language. They were forbidden to read and write and do the things that would have benefited them as people. That also, would you agree, has impacted us and has had a long-lasting impact. And the trauma and the drama of all of that, there is historical research, would you agree, to show that?
We had the smartest, the brightest people who were brought over here. They often say that America Christianized the black people. They never talk about the fact that Eden, if you look at it that way, you read the first chapter, second chapter of Genesis, it talks about the rivers that run through the Garden of Eden. Every one of them are in Africa. You read about where in the Bible from beginning to end, from first AD, we had black bishops of the Catholic Church, and they honor them there. We were not an illiterate people. We were not a people without skills. We built pyramids. We were engineers. We were architects. And that's why we were able to do so much work for others, because we had the skills and the knowledge. The myths of what has come down from generation to generation are absolutely that. They are myths.
Just to help you answer some of the questions that were asked before, in your Senate bill, page 1, this bill is pretty limited because it says that the commission will look at individuals whose ancestors were enslaved in the state of Maryland, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Impacted by inequitable government policies, correct?
Correct.
And then on page 2, it says that also includes inequitable government policies, meaning federal, state, or local government policies during the period known as the post-Reconstruction era or the Jim Crow era, because that was the era after, the era that actually a lot of the redlining and all these discriminatory policies came about, right?
Correct, that is correct. And were put in statute.
And were put in statute
Right.
to keep them from moving into certain neighborhoods, getting
Intentionally, that's
loans
correct.
and all that stuff.
Since the Civil War.
That's
yes.
right. Delegate Ross, followed by Chisholm.
Well, I'm going to significantly reduce my remarks because, far be it for me to try to make a case or a point that Delegate Woods has really so eloquently made. I will not say a lot of what I was going to say, but I'll just make 2 quick points. One is, why would we not want to see a study to tell us if reparations are due, if they're due?
Can I ask you something?
Yes.
Can you ask your questions, ask it in a form of a question to
yes,
him?
I will.
Yes.
So, and I don't know if you can answer this because you're the proponent of this, like you want this to happen. This is almost a question for opposition, but
Right.
I feel like it needs to be put out there, which is, why wouldn't we? What's the argument for why we would not want to know if reparations are due? What's feasible? What's harmful about doing a study like this? Is there any aspect of this that creates some kind of, problem for us to know?
And without judging everyone in the same way, I look at what's happening around the country now. Hide all the history books because we don't want to talk about it. We don't want our children to feel embarrassed or ashamed. Let's not talk about it. Let's act like it never happened. I think that it is for some of those reasons that people would rather forget about it and not talk about it or minimize it. That's not everybody. But what I see happening in certain states where these books are, tabooed, we're woke. What's the opposite of woke? Asleep. That makes no sense to me. All that is a way of saying that you're coming to a knowledge of what's been happening, and you simply want to sit down and end it. That's it. You can never deal with a response to tragedy unless you're first willing to admit that it happened.
So your answer is, what's harmful is that once we know, it might force us to actually do something about it.
That is correct.
And so that's what we have to determine is if that's okay.
And that's what's happening with our children.
Yeah.
I look generations back, I look at racism to our children. For most part, they think it's crazy. Every generation with an awareness and with actual contact, I see in this generation some hope. I see in the next generation some hope, because that's exactly what's been happening.
Yeah.
But you got to admit it and look at it before you can never really make a decision as to whether something should be done about it.
Yes. And if I can, this was very quick. Yep, very quick. It's a question. I was just going to ask you, because I thought I heard something earlier that sounded like there are other historically disadvantaged groups of people. We know that. I mean, there are so many, right? What do you think about how maybe this study, or can you speak to how maybe this study can be maybe a blueprint for how some of those other groups reparations could be provided to some of those groups? It's not to discount anybody as I view it. I mean, this could actually just be a blueprint to be followed for some of those groups in the future.
And I think we help each other that way. My Jewish brothers and sisters, what they went through was horrific, right? We really have a lot in common. I think in some respects and in some countries, reparations were made for my Jewish brothers and sisters. And I think we can learn from each other. We're not the only ones. We are, though, in this country, historically, the only ones who had it in statute that we're 3/5 of a person, in statute that we could be lynched, in statute that we were no more than property. We're the only ones in this country where the United States of America put in its laws that these people are repugnant and not worth anything. That was put in our own books in our own law books and Constitution, amendments to be changed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have to say I appreciate the respectful, calm debate, right? Because we're in a safe space.
That's right.
And this committee does that. We are very thoughtful, so I want to just thank you for doing that and continuing to do it. I have Delegate Chisholm, followed by Rosenberg, followed by Hill. Delegate Chisholm.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Before I ask questions, I just want to introduce myself to Delegate Woods. I'm Delegate Brian Chisholm. She didn't know I was in this committee today.
No, she has been dealing with a lack of sleep.
I love you. This is a great debate. I actually love talking history, so I appreciate you being here and appreciate the bill. I just have a hard time trying to figure out, all right, how do you unpack all this? Look, the evils of slavery are evils of slavery. There'll always be evil. I mean, it's a different time now. I can't even fathom.
I agree with you.
It was evil. And we talk about history, and, I'm not going to get on my Republican soapbox and say it was the Republicans that fought against slavery. It was the Republicans that fought against Jim Crow. And it does get tough, because then I know I've looked this before and said, how many people actually owned slaves at the height of slavery? And I know, obviously in the South there was more, but population-wise it was like 1.4%. A lot more corporations, right? Even I think J.P. Morgan's corporation owned a bunch of, because it was almost like large business owners, which is sad but true. How do you unpack all of this and say, okay, we're going to have the whole population pay, and I know your argument's going to be, well, everybody benefit. Right. Well, it's hard to fight against the counterfactual. When we do the study, how do you figure out, okay, who really is to blame, who really pays, and who really is rewarded? I mean, it's nowhere near the same, but the Chisholms were sold as indentured servants because we got kicked out of Scotland for fighting against the government. And look, government's always been, it wasn't just the free people of America. Government has done some very bad things in every country, including this country. So how do you unpack it all and make it so that even with the study, okay, this is fair? I think that we're not the first state to ever look at reparations, but it's very difficult to figure everything out. And what do we in a perfect world, what are we really trying to answer as far as who deserves what, who's really to blame, who's really to pay? It's very complex.
And thank you for saying that. And I do very much understand exactly what you're saying. I think, and first of all, that's why we want to study, to see if it's even possible. And maybe it means everything isn't about money. It may not be about money. There are many different ways that one can look at what is a way to help a people for whom racism and all else did not end with the end of slavery. So to look at that, and for all of us to sit down at the table and look at it, because as I've just gotten an idea from you or a question from you that makes me, I'm going to go back and do some pondering and some thinking on it, and I thank you for sharing that. Because all of us, with our thoughts and our ideas, no one person can come up with it. But we have, I believe, in here, a commission of a diversity, a diverse number, and of people with backgrounds that can at least help us to come up with those answers. I do not have them. I just know that this is meaningful, it's real, and it needs to be done.
Okay.
Thank you.
Delegate Rosenberg, followed by Hill. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good to see you again, Senator.
Good to see you.
First, thank you for what you had to say about the Jewish community historically. I appreciate it. Thank you. Was Richard Nixon's Southern strategy in 1968 designed to bring the Southern segregationists who had opposed civil rights legislation in the Senate and elsewhere into the Republican Party?
I'm sorry, phrase it another way.
Nixon had a Southern strategy, he was enunciated it. It wasn't something undercover. I'm sorry.
It's 3 years after.
Can we, let's
I would like to hear
let's hear the question.
But Nixon's strategy was to bring Southern segregationists into the Republican Party, and he succeeded.
Mm-hmm.
My other question is, it's my understanding, I was not here yet, but that when Maryland passed a public accommodations law, several counties exempted themselves.
That is correct.
From the public accommodations law.
That is correct. That is correct. And you can point to many, many examples of that in many different ways, not just from Republicans, but from Democratic presidents. When we initiated under Bill Clinton, who admits it himself, this tough on crime, we knew it was geared toward. We knew how cocaine got into black communities. We also knew that black people didn't have planes, airplanes, et cetera, et cetera. I think there's a lot that if it's uncovered, we can sit down, separate truth from fallacy, so that together we can at least forge toward something that will make this country a much better country. So let me thank you for your question. Let me I think you and I came in together in 1945. We've been here before any of y'all got here. We came in together. And
I wasn't born in 1945.
You are dating yourself.
Okay, I'm sorry. Forget that.
Go to Delegate Hill, followed by Hutchinson, followed by Bagnall. Again, thank you for the respectful discussion. Delegate Hill.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you, Senator, for this bill. I guess I just want to start, since she's allowing a few questions. It's an important bill, and I appreciate her flexibility. Thank you, Madam Chair, for your flexibility. There's a lot of discussion here about blame and who's at fault, and that's not my understanding of what reparations is about. Is that right? What is it about? Is it about looking at our history? Is it looking at impacts over generations? Is it trying to do repair and correction so that as a country we can move forward, or as a state we can move forward? Is that what it's about, or is it about pointing a finger at someone and saying you did something wrong?
Well, I think pointing finger does nothing, and I don't think this is about pointing the finger, because if we did that, the argument would be correct that, gee, you know, that was way back then, and what have we done? It's not about what you've done and what I've done or what generation. It's about admitting that it did happen. Mm-hmm. It's about admitting the consequences of what happened, and can we together as a state and as a nation repair it? I think when we start pointing fingers, that's when we are totally off track. And that's where, divided, we
fall, and united,
yeah. That's where all of the, and we keep allowing some to cause us as a nation to be divided, rather than having a voice to say, look, let's come together and let's get this straight. So I would think the last thing we want to do is ever in this is point fingers at anyone.
Okay, and if I may follow up. So we had a lot of conversation in the House this morning when we were looking at the budget about the Augustine Commission, which you're, I'm sure, familiar with, that looked at our financial situation, our tax situation, and said, how did we get here and how can we get out? Is that any different than looking at what the impact of enslavement with laws that not only enslaved people, but once freed, continued to enslave them, laws that took away or did not allow people to have civil rights and allowed people to act against the law, to oppress other people, so that, for instance, my understanding is that when we talk about lynching, that the laws that had been created by the majority or the people in power allowed them to, take someone with very little, actual jurisprudence, right, and try them and to find them guilty. Right. And so the law was being followed, and then they would decide that despite the law, they had to personally kill them. They had to make a big party out of it. They had to hang them up because there was a lesson that was being, so they, even when they were writing the laws, black folks, having been formerly enslaved, were considered so less of a citizen and so less of a human being that they could work outside of the laws to do, because the laws only applied to the people in power when they wanted to apply to the people in power, but the laws apply to the people out of power anytime the people in power say they do. Is that part of this issue?
It is.
Okay. And so, so my question is, when I see this history, that at various times in the U.S., when so-called enslaved people were emancipated, the U.S. government found ways to compensate the former slave owners for that. So they got paid $300 or so per person relief, but the people who were formerly enslaved didn't get anything.
Historical
Is that
fact.
correct?
That is historical.
And at the same time, after the Civil War, while we were encouraging people from other countries to come and settle the West and giving them land and giving them a hand up and allowing them to settle, we couldn't figure out how to find not even 40 acres and a mule for the formerly enslaved. Is that part of the issue that this is looking at, about what reparations or compensations we're giving to other people that were systematically denied to the folks who were actually enslaved, and how has that impacted?
And I think that's what I meant, whether it was the best usage or not, of the analogy of I start the race here, you start the race in New York, we're running at the same pace, but I'll never catch you.
And if I keep tripping you along the way, they're telling you have to start over again.
That is correct.
It becomes even harder.
Lies the problem.
All right.
In terms of education, in terms of economics, in terms of contracting, in terms of housing, in terms of medical care, I don't care where you look, you will see these statistics that are the same. That if anyone has been harmed the most through many different ways, it's minorities, it's black people. and you give me the industry, I'll show you the numbers.
And if I can, my final question, would you agree it's just
I'm going to come back to you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I have to be fair and balanced.
Thank you.
Delegate Hutchinson.
Madam Chair. Senator, thanks for being here. I think it's the first time I've actually seen you in real life, and thanks for bringing this. I could say this is an intriguing bill to me. I'm a pretty pragmatic guy, and so I've just been thinking this through. We just left 6.5 hours of debating how we're going to fill a $3 billion hole in our budget. Last year, I think we had 2 reparation bills through this committee, which didn't move forward because of a fiscal note. I think that was attached to them as well. What we ignored today was the unknown of the outstanding liabilities on the statute limit on sexual assaults. Right. So we have this. So where I'm going with this is, and listening to Delegate Ross, that the assumption is that they would come out, this commission, that reparations are due. Those reparations are then would be the liability of the state. And the state's liability is through taxpayers.
If it were only monetary, yes.
So if it wasn't, okay, so interesting that you, so if it's monetary, what if the state comes back, and I could see a bill coming forward, we're back with reparations, and how would you feel, A, if that didn't go forward, or B, it did go forward, and now we're coming back to the backs of all Marylanders, white, black, brown, to raise their taxes to be able to pay for a monetary reparation?
And I wish I had the answer to that, but I'm not an expert in terms of money in the budget. I do know that there are various ways that it can be done. For example, when it comes to mortgage, when it comes to housing, when it comes to how you can get a house, or what will it cost you for down payment? How could that work? There are other ways in the state giving funds. And one, I think the biggest thing, you start with an apology. You know, it got to start with an apology and an admission of it somewhere. Who apologized? I don't know, but it's got to start there. But then we have to look for ways to say, how can you catch up to the person who started, to the race that started in New York and you started in Florida, and you'll never catch up that way. How do you do it? I think that's where this commission comes into play. Because with all of our minds working together on this, we can come up with some very doable ways to start somewhere. You know what I'm saying? Start somewhere. Start looking at ways that we can make sure that 73% of those who are incarcerated are not black men. There are ways to look at how do you shape lives after what's occurred and what's happened. How do you? There's just a lot of how do you, but until we sit down, if we keep kicking the can down the road, we'll never come up with any answers.
Thank you. I was going to ask another question, but I don't think I need to, because I think I've been myopic in thinking that reparations is paying back money, and I was going to ask you what other options there are, but I think you just sort of demonstrated that to me, what other areas are non-monetary.
That's right.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
And I usually wait to the end, but just to clarify, prior bills that dealt with similar topics and reparations in the past assume reparations. This bill in front of us does not assume that. It is a study. And even if the commission were to say reparations are needed, and there's a lot of things here in the bill that said that they can come up with, right? It is up to the General Assembly to then come back with a bill to do that, if we want it. So there are a lot of steps still. It's not like the examples, respectfully, that Delegate, that you just gave, because this is a study. It has reparations in there, but there's so many other things they can look at, with education, mortgages, housing, you name it. But even if they came back and recommended it, they cannot come and say, do it. It is up to us to come back here and look at our fiscal picture and look at all our responsibilities and make a decision. Wouldn't you say that this is a thoughtful, smart way to do it by doing the research, looking at different options.
That's right.
Even in the bill, it states that you can look at not just the state paying, but, you know, certain entities and businesses, right?
That's right.
As well. Thank you. I have, after you, I had Bagno, and then I saw Shalega, and then I saw Taveras, okay? And thank you again for the thoughtful, respectful discussion. Delegate Bagno.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Senator, for being here and for answering our questions. And I know that this is a challenging discussion because of the word slavery and the word reparations. They're just so big, to my colleague's point. So I'm looking at the bill and the language in the bill, and it speaks to members of state agencies and members who are state representatives and members from higher education in the state of Maryland. So is this an opportunity for us to center the state and the state's residents in this work to allow us to focus this Herculean effort on and our understanding and potentially, yes, making amends for historical wrongs on our state, so we don't have to figure out the big picture. We can just look at the impact on our state.
Correct.
And what our state can then do to make amends.
Correct. And it may not be, much is a relevant term. Much to somebody do a whole lot, and that's much. But much in this case may not be all of that. And I think that that's the reason, again, that we want to figure out not just what we believe we should do, but what is a practical way of getting it done. And by the way, Madam Chair, you see what the commission is made up of. And if you and some in their wisdom want to add a few more to that, feel free to do that. But yes, you're absolutely right.
And Madam Chair, if I could have one follow-up, because I'm also looking at page 4 of the bill, and is your understanding of reparations as it's spelled out in the bill, it can be including official statements of apology, monetary compensation, property tax rebates, social service assistance, licensing, permit fee waivers, reimbursement. So it's a long list of possibilities that we would then consider.
That is correct.
So it's not simply centered around monetary.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Followed by Taveras. Delegate Shalega.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good to see you, Pastor.
Good to see you.
Haven't seen you in a while. Thank you for bringing the bill. Look, slavery was the greatest evil that happened in this country, and it's shameful that it took so many years to get the Taney statue off the State House grounds. And, there were, I'll just say, God rest his soul, Mike Miller kept that statue on the State House grounds. I was very supportive of that, and Larry Hogan is the governor that got that statue moved. Yes. And we have, further to go with that. The Dred Scott decision was horrific that you spoke about, just horrific. In modern day, talking about how the Black community, I think, my opinion, needs help, and I hope you'd be willing to have the commission to look at this, is education.
Yes.
And would you give school choice? Because it has been too many generations. I raised my kids in Baltimore City. I taught in Baltimore City. It is too many generations of failed school, failed school, failed school. We have grandparents and great-grandparents taking their kids back to the same failed schools.
Yes.
Would you put that in your bill? Would you put in school choice? Because that education is how we lift people out of poverty. I think we all agree on that.
That is correct.
And it has been 50 years, 60. Look, Poly was the best high school in the entire country when my grandfather went there in the 20s, and it was segregated.
You're from Baltimore? Park Heights Avenue.
Yeah. So, we need to return that level of education. But at some point, after 50 years of apologizing for a terrible education system, when is it going to be enough? And money is not going to change it. I think we need school choice.
Let me quote this. I think that it's not just that, but let's look at where it's happening. I came into this legislature in 1994. In 1994, Baltimore and Prince George's County, predominantly black, were 1 and 2 of the worst performing schools in the state. Today, all these years later, that's still the case.
Exactly.
And we have to ask ourselves, really ask ourselves,
yes,
why?
Why?
It's not just about money. There's so many other factors.
And not just why, but how do we change it?
And how, that's correct.
Because
how do we change it?
It's been 30 years
That's right.
since you're talking about a lack of change, and the only answers that we've heard here are more money in the system. And I pray that you stand up to the teachers union and put school choice on the table for kids.
And don't take this the wrong way, but when our parents went to those little schools that were there, one teacher, a log cabin, et cetera, they actually did better than most of us are doing today. Number two, it's when it comes to choice, I think a parent should have the right to send that child to the best school that they think, because we don't have time to lose them. Nobody will keep their child in a burning building, and I know some of my Democrat friends with me, or they disagree with me. You got a kid in a burning building. I'm not going to say wait till you put the fire out, because 3 years and they're out of
Exactly. You lose them by 3rd grade. They need literacy.
I want my kids to have the best education right now, and I don't want to get into an argument of what is political, what is private, what is public. I just don't want to do that. I just want my kid to go to the best college and have the best education that they can. That's what I mean when I say we all have something that we bring to the table. We just have to meet and talk and be realistic.
Well, amen, Pastor, but let's put some school choice in the commission. Thank you.
Thank you.
Delegate Taveras.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I know that folks want to eat. I want to just say that I know that a lot of this will be discussed in subcommittee, I'm guessing. Would you not say that a lot of the issues that will be discussed, such as deeds of land, like in Hyattsville, remain in the paperwork as whites-only areas, and the things that your community has faced as African Americans, lynching and Jim Crow, are things that happened within our lifetime.
That's right. They are things that have happened in our lifetime.
Thank you.
I can remember as a kid going with my dad downtown Baltimore, Hosher Cones and other places like that. I think I said that right. And you couldn't eat at the lunch counter. I remember going down south with him, and we had to go in the back door. I remember that. I remember my father's face, and how, and now that I've gotten older, I can understand it, how degrading and demeaning it was. My wife's father fought in World War II. He died. He lived to be 102 years old. He said, and after I fought in World War II, I came home with my uniform on, just to be called the word that no black person wants to hear. That's lifetime. So it's not something that's so far removed. I remember on and on.
There's plenty of Netflix shows and books that folks can read, but thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Okay. All right, we're good? All right. Thank you.
I thank you all for listening to me, and thank you all for this conversation. Like I said, we all learn a lot. And let me see, you gave me something that I can go home and think about. Thank you. We all, when we sit at the table, we can do just that. And thank you for hearing me.
And I wanted to, if I may, I wanted to remind you, and I know sometimes we're up there and we forget, that in the bill, on page 4, although it says we will look at, starting on page line 1 to 8, all the different things that we will look at, right? Such as business incentives, childcare,
Right.
debt forgiveness, and so forth. It also says on line 13 that we can look at, the commission can look at any other topic deemed appropriate by the commission.
That is correct.
Correct?
Yes.
Thank you. All right, thank you so much for
Thank you,
being
and
with
good day to
us.
all of you.
This concludes this bill hearing, and have a blessed day. And for the committee, stay just seated for 1 second for scheduling purposes. Can you bring us down, please? I know you have had a long day today, 7 hours on the floor.